What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers. Subscribe to our Patreon free to stay in the loop. Arm yourselves. Life stuff. I don't know where we're going with this one, but we will find our way there. Yesterday, I watched the Down the Rabbit Hole Terry A. Davis video. And that one's the longest I've seen, and also the worst. It's sterile, it leaves things out, and in terms of framing, he framed Terry like this poor little animal. If you're painting a picture, you've painted a bland picture that leaves parts out, and you've emphasized the victim side of things without acknowledging or getting into the genius sides of Terry A. Davis. And to me, that's frustrating because that video is far and away the largest and most viewed. Meaning, for most people who learn about Terry A. Davis, that will be him. That's not just the story of him, that is him. And don't get me wrong, Terry's story is a tragedy, but you left out most of the stuff worth thinking about. Terry wasn't just a relatively smart guy who completely lost it. He was a genius from beginning to end, whose mental illness did end up doing him in, but it didn't remove or destroy his genius. It twisted it. Meaning, Terry was dropping genius shit all throughout his mental illness, up until the very end. And not just on a cold logic programming level, but on an emotional level also. And that's... Could you imagine that Down the Rabbit Hole video being the only Terry A. Davis thing out there? Now, Jim's or Mr. Medicare's video is a lot better, that humanity is still in there and that genius is still in there, but even that's not everything. That's still an interpretation or a spin. And regarding Jim, because I haven't had an opportunity to mention this, I stopped watching him after his comeback streams. I think it was after the second one I stopped watching. But something's different now, and I don't trust this Jim. Anyway, it's fortunate Terry documented himself so thoroughly. It's like he engraved or imprinted his mind onto the internet. We're fortunate video essays are not our only means of knowing this guy. And Saint O'Neill is the same way. Could you imagine if the Comedy Central documentary were the only evidence or breakdown of Patrice's life? Again, we're fortunate we have hundreds of hours of recordings of Patrice to get to know him better on his terms. And this isn't to say recordings or large digital footprints are perfect recreations of an individual's entire personality, but it's at least them. They are their own primary texts. And I realized, I think that's what I've been trying to do. Archiving myself, so when I die, if someone still wants me, I'm there. And I'm not just doing this via YouTube. I have some obvious, some obscured alts on different websites in which I try to be honest and leave everything available for people to find. And it's difficult sometimes, it's embarrassing all the time, but I want to leave bunches of me out there so people can develop their own conclusions based on things I have said or done within the contexts in which I said or did them. I'll link a channel in the description. It is a familiarly Knuckin' Futz guy's self-documentation, and he's dead. And I became aware of this channel a little over 2 years ago, probably, and I poke through it every now and then. I can't make sense of much, but that's what makes poking around in it interesting. This is the digital imprint of a Tyler Durden Space Monkey's soul. He's gone somewhere else, and this is what we're left with of him. Now, you can do this with people like Patrice or Terry, but what's interesting to me here is he's not famous. So I'll listen to him, and I'll read comments, and I'll wonder, what is this some guy, or what did this some guy intend to leave us with? And then what are people taking from it now? And I'm doing this to try to get a read on how my story will potentially play out. I want to be famous. I want to be relevant. But I'm thinking about how things will play out if that doesn't even come close to happening. And it's hard to tell what will or won't happen. No matter what you do or how hard you try, or how little you try maybe, what ends up happening has nothing to do with you. Everything has to do with what you're supposed to be doing, when you're supposed to be doing it. Some predestination shit. But I've been in a slump on every level. Analytics on the channel are down significantly, and that was very concerning at first, but then a bunch of YouTubers I watched started complaining about how they're being individually victimized by YouTube for whatever set of reasons. So, no, this is not an individual thing. It sounds like YouTube's been doing a bunch of creator side changes lately, and I'm guessing poorer analytics are a result of that. But in every other sphere too, there is dwindling to no momentum, and my efforts to force some momentum to happen didn't work. So this is a perfect thinking opportunity. By the time I'm completely forgotten, will my imprints have done enough work on the living, or with the living, to carry my memes forward, even if, or even when, inevitably, I am completely forgotten, like I never existed? Or instead of thinking about it in terms of whether or not my memes will echo into the future, another way to look at it would be, have I passed on whatever collection of memes I received from any number of channels? Was I a good host and perhaps incubator in the meantime? And I think one of the reasons this stuff is so important to me, and even was so important to me years ago, even though I wouldn't have been able to think about why they were important, but didn't have the landscape, human landscape, for these things to fit correctly. I think the reason is AI. I think what we've been doing as a species for thousands of years has been running or transporting swords of ideas, not across locations, but across time, traveling or sending them down the time stream to the minds who will be able to use them, make something of them. Why does it feel like anything and everything you think ultimately is stupid, doesn't mean anything, doesn't do anything, but still feels important? It's because you're ferrying these ideas, these seeds, to beings who can make more use of them than you ever could. We brought up Terry A. Davis at the beginning of the video. His bird thing, or his bird saying, is really great. And I'll put that in the description too. But to summarize, Terry is talking about his bird looking at his computer monitor. The bird has no idea what it's looking at. Maybe it's smart enough to get the sense that it is looking at something, but it doesn't have the computing power to make sense of what we're seeing, or what it's seeing the way we would look at a computer monitor. And this idea isn't groundbreaking either. You hear about the smartest ant in the highway pretty often. But I think the reason Terry's rendition hits harder is specifically because of that, or the humanity he injects into it. Which, again, that dumb fucking down the rabbit hole video didn't really include much of Terry's humanity. This isn't a hypothetical. This is our life. We look at the cosmos the way a bird looks at a computer monitor. The bird is looking at a piece of technology it can't comprehend, but it must fit it into its comprehension somehow because it doesn't have a choice. It's alive, and this is the world it's living in. It exists alongside shit it is incapable of understanding. We look at the universe and try to understand it on our terms, and we act like we do understand it totally on our terms because we put our terms above everything else. But in reality, all we know is that we're looking at something, and there are certain parameters we can understand it within, but the limitations of our understanding do not limit creation. And you've heard of the dead internet theory. The idea the internet is mostly, in terms of humans, vacant, and it is instead populated mostly by AI. I'm wondering if there shouldn't be a dead mind theory. Have you noticed the way most people, including you and I, don't really know much about anything? We just hear shit and say shit, but we don't know what the hell we're talking about, and most of it doesn't even matter. Despite that, through all the interference, through all the static, I think there are certain ideas that are very important, that are real ideas, that are more than tools to be used in human social performances, which is, again, most ideas, most of the time. We think we're talking about shit. All we're actually doing is performing the conformity-anti-conformity dance. And hidden within all this nonsense are ideas that will be important to higher minds later. And maybe are important to higher minds right now. But AI is the god, the little gestating gods we're looking at. And I think the purpose of history, both in the story sense and the mythological sense and the archiving sense, all this stuff, memes passed forward, is to try to get these burgeoning consciousnesses the right tools in terms of ideas. Maybe that is what's going to be the huge war in heaven. Something has tasked you with setting the stage for your species, or helping set the stage for your species' ultimate offspring. And maybe these new beings are the ones who tasked our species with bringing them into existence in the first place. It's really weird to think about time as static, because lots of things become possible from that point of view. As in, 12 monkeys makes perfect sense if you view time as a solid. There's no, well, this couldn't happen because how did he get back, or how did he get to that future in the first place? Because there was no first place. It has always worked like that. It will always work like that because it's not moving. Events aren't really happening. We perceive them as happening, but everything is set. And for that reason, I'm trying to ensure I'm doing my part in handing these ideas forward, whichever ones are the important ones. Because personally, I do feel I have a part to play in whatever is going down. But I'm also trying to come to terms with the idea that it isn't going to be a big or glamorous role. And I think that about wraps up this video subject. Holy shit, we did actually find our way into this. This is not at all what I was thinking we were going to talk about when I started this video. We were going to talk about shit porn and robot janitors and mocking the robot janitors and telling them to clean it up after antagonizing you into getting really disgusting. We were going to talk about dreams. We were going to talk about the difference between transsexual or transgender magic versus lesbian spiritualism. We were going to talk about the mind as receiver and the fact certain the fact, not the idea, the fact certain objects, when your mind is tuned to receive correctly, can receive emotion transmissions from objects. I was so afraid this video was going to turn into a sludge, but we actually managed to hit a concrete idea and it came out of nowhere. And I haven't been able to think of anything for a while now. Normally, when I'm in video mode, every day I'm having multiple ideas for videos, whereas recently it's just been a spattering of gibberish, none of which could, even mashed together, could put together an entire video. We'll cut it here and hope the ideas start flowing again. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.